Thank you so much for being with us. The obviously the global energy system is going through such change right now, and Chevron is really at the center of so many of these conversations, these shifts. You're one of the world's largest energy companies, and so we're here to talk a bit about resilience, responsibility, innovation, and especially against this backdrop, which is ever changing. So it's a known fact that everyone wants a resilient and reliable energy sector. But what does that realistically mean, Mark? Well, let's answer that first, and we'll go follow-up question.
I think it starts with recognition of a few things. I think we've been reminded in the last maybe decade that reliable, affordable, and ever cleaner energy is vital to progress, vital to security, vital to economic prosperity. And I think people can accept that, but we don't put it in context. The energy system is very large and it's growing. It'll grow 10% in the next decade by most estimates. We actually need more energy solutions than less, and we need policies that are common sense and durable. So a couple of numbers just to put that in context. I think most people estimate that by 2050 we'll have 10 billion people on the planet. There's still 750 million people who don't have electricity. There's 2 billion people that still are using either cooking stoves or biomass in their homes to create their food at night for their families. A very unhealthy situation. And things that maybe that people often don't remember is how big the energy system is. So you have those gaps, and then you have the scale. Maybe the best way to think about this is, I think with the IEA's recent publication, they talk about in 2024 the size of the energy sector, just how much energy is consumed. And to put it in a context that my children can understand, it's like driving across the United States 23 billion times in 1 year. 23 billion, that's how much energy we consume today. And it took 40 years for oil, which we're all very familiar with, to grow from 1% of the energy supply to 10%. It took 40 years, and that was in a much smaller energy system. So you need focus on energy and you need time.
And everyone talks about the energy transition. It's obviously a commonplace term. People have different ideas of what that means. How does Chevron think of the energy transition, and particularly, how do you apply the real world dynamics or the fact base that you operate with against that question?
Well, at Chevron, we believe that the future of energy is lower carbon. But again, I think you have to put that in context. As a responsible supplier of energy, today we really have to do two things. We have to provide the energy that's needed today in the most responsible fashion, while we develop an energy system for the future that, at least in the places that we would play, kind of go to our strength. So, we're growing domestic production. We're operating more efficiently. We've reduced this isn't meant to be a Chevron commercial, but we've reduced our methane by over 50% in roughly the last decade. And we're leaning into areas where lower carbon solutions can exist. We are the second largest U.S. supplier of biofuels. We're making significant investments in carbon capture, sequestration, and hydrogen. But the point of all that is you'd want a responsible energy supplier to do all of those things over time.
Mhm. And in that context, what does a responsible, or what Chevron's definition of responsible energy operator look like given consumer and business demand?
Well, so interestingly enough, when you look at, given all of the activity that's going on today, demand for our products not only has not changed, it's either holding or growing across our system. And as I mentioned earlier, energy in general, energy demand is growing. So we have to economically grow to provide, what consumers need today, and then do that in the most efficient way possible, both from a cost and carbon perspective, while we choose the areas where we think we can play in an energy system for the future. But notice it's not binary. It's not one or the other. It's both. And we need all those forms of energy allowed to compete in the marketplace so that we have choices longer term.
Hmm. And how we're in Washington D.C. Obviously, how does that translate into policy, especially with organizations like yourselves that are considering very long-term horizons, capital expenditures. What are your thoughts on that front?
Yeah, as a company that's been around for 145 years, and just for the record, I've not worked at Chevron for all of those 145, but many of them. Uh, I would say maybe a couple of things. We are a long cycle business. We talked about the scale of the energy industry, so you need policy that balances economic prosperity, energy security, and environmental protection perpetually. You need that balance. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that all forms of energy have a chance to compete. So, governments picking winners and losers in energy supply likely doesn't give us the choices we need longer term, both to meet the demand of today and build a system for the future. So you do need durable, common sense policies. There can be differing opinions on that, but the idea of toggling back and forth would make it hard for any industry to make progress. But we're in it for the long haul, and we've seen just about everything in those 145 years.
Yeah. And just looking back at 145 years, is there a time that's in the past that's similar to now that you can think
No,
of?
I've learned, I learned every cycle, every circumstance is a little bit different. But think about, we've experienced pandemics, we've experienced wars, we've certainly experienced times where sanctions have been in place and product didn't flow as it normally flowed. And what both the energy system and what Chevron always does is you figure a way through that in a way that's good for people that need the energy and for our shareholders.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about AI, and I just thought before we get into the more specifics of it, maybe you could just provide the audience this sort of a sense of the AI energy kind of macro picture. Because I think it's obviously thrown out there a lot that that the AI revolution is putting huge pressure on energy sources, and there's massive investments going on. The headlines are all around the place. What's going on at a macro level, and then let's get specifically into Chevron's work there.
Well, I'd say at the highest level, it is an exciting potential. And you mentioned the phrase headlines. I certainly see the same headlines that everybody else sees. If you step all the way back, I think from an energy perspective, you have two things that are really exciting about artificial intelligence, some of which we apply already in Chevron. One is the demand for energy. It requires a lot of reliable, affordable energy to have a data center and to have AI work. The second element is then doing all of the energy supply in a more efficient way by leveraging artificial intelligence. The pace of those two things together is yet to be determined.
But how significant is the incremental energy demand? I mean, obviously there are different scenarios and different estimates, but is it? I mean, it's considered in common knowledge is just this gargantuan demand that may not be able to be met today and needs to be addressed
Yeah.
preemptively.
Yeah, I think the hard part, and so my daughter's in law school right now, and she's taught me a phrase that's really helpful, and it depends. And I
I
think
think my daughter is that line.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that today, if you go back in time, if I had to pick a bit of an analog in our industry, it would be the liquefied natural gas business, where people talked all around the world about building liquefaction plants, multi-billion-dollar investments where you needed a buyer and a seller to get together ahead of time and agree on what was going to happen given the size and scale of the investment. And people said hundreds and hundreds of those would be built, and then many got built, but clearly not that many. So I think today it's a little bit hard to decipher just how many are necessary, but I think it's a significant opportunity. In the case, I'll segue to maybe how Chevron thinks about this because it connects.
Yeah.
It connects to that. Uh, what do data centers and artificial intelligence need? They need a lot of energy. They need it really reliable. They need backup power. They have to have permitting and regulatory environment where they can make that work. And they'd like it to be as close as possible to the people that will consume the output. In Chevron's case, we're the second largest natural gas supplier in the United States. And what you might not know is we actually produce 5 gigawatts of power in our own facilities in locations where you don't have a grid available. So the behind the meter power opportunity for Chevron is we've done it before. We have a lot of the primary product that will be necessary to make it happen. And we chose to make an arrangement, form a venture with GE Vernova and Engine Number One, where we have some of the largest turbines in the world, reservation slots ready to go starting at the end of this year, early next year. And speed is important today. So many of the data centers, a lot of these big players want to be first, and that suits the system we have set up for the moment. So we'll see how it develops. We'll continue to monitor, but in the long run, I think it will be good for the economy, and Chevron will try to figure out its place as to how we can support that.
It's interesting. I mean, you talk about the speed and the rush to the market. We're also seeing a little bit of a slowdown, but pulling back, at least internationally, from some of the big tech companies and some of the financial firms into data centers. Is that a long-term trend as well, or
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not.
response? But
Yeah, I'm not sure I know, but I would say that I think the initial interest is high. People that can find the right location in the energy source, they'd like to be first. How fast they go beyond that, I think, will depend on what the market needs.
And sticking with this question of AI and power, what does that mean for innovation, particularly in this space? I mean, is this the highest priority for Chevron's innovation activities? I know you're probably innovating across many different fronts, but or is it one of several priorities?
Yeah, there's many levels of artificial intelligence from machine learning to actual AI itself, and we apply quite a bit of it today. And I was in a meeting earlier this week where we were talking about exploration. So this is actually going out and finding new resources for application today. And this goes a little bit again to how long I've been in the industry, but I can remember with a number two pencil reviewing diagrams to try to figure out where the oil or the natural gas might be, and then you'd mark that up and you would stick it in a box. And then you'd go look at a basin that looked really similar to that. So another part in the world that maybe had some of the same geology. First off, you'd have to remember where you put the box. Then you'd have to open the box and figure out, where that document was. This was how the whole industry did it. Well, none of those boxes exist anymore because they've all been digitized. They've all been put into a system where you say a couple parameters, and the system will go get all of the information available in our company on that type of geologic setup, whether that's to find things like white hydrogen, which would be naturally produced hydrogen, whether it's to find pore space to store carbon, or whether it's to find oil or natural gas that's needed today.
Hmm.
It takes minutes now versus what would be months.
That's amazing. Now let's talk a bit about the low carbon future, and what I've always found interesting about Chevron is from your leadership on down, a sort of a desire to engage in rational conversations with all sides, and so thank you for doing that. Obviously, the low carbon quest is a sort of a massive, almost never ending kind of global effort. What are you doing at Chevron to advance that future in particular? And I'd love to, since there's so many public sector and private sector leaders here, the next 3 days, what are the public-private partnerships and policies that potentially could advance and accelerate progress?
Well, I think you've started with lower carbon is a forever thing. So the concept of pursuing a lower carbon energy system, I highlighted the scale of the system. So it's going to take time. So you do need partnerships because no one company, no one country will be able to manifest that desire, that change over time. And so in our case, we specifically focused in the areas where we thought we had the capabilities to make a difference. And so in our particular case, that would be in refined fuels, using a completely different feedstock to create lower carbon fuels. Another area, we produce and manage a lot of hydrogen today. The economics of hydrogen will require some technological breakthroughs, I suspect, over time, but we wanted to lean in to test solutions, and we've got a couple projects underway as we speak. And then carbon capture was another area where we thought, well, we know pore space, we know how to capture carbon, we can probably bring those capabilities together. But maybe more importantly is bringing parties together. One of Chevron's strengths is actually partnership. So gathering people who needed a little bit of support, meaning money, or people who needed a guinea pig, to use a highly technical term, right? Needed a place to go try that particular new technology is something that we've leaned into heavily. So in the late 1990s, we created the Chevron Technology Venture. And that group is designed to invest in companies that need to accelerate technology development, and we're into billions of dollars of money spent. And a year or so ago, we introduced our third energy fund to help people find solutions. And looking back since 1999, of all the technologies that have been developed, where we helped fund, and in some cases we help fund and stay as part of the company. In the other cases, we help allow them to test on our operation. 40% of those technologies have been tested in our business, and some have turned into large commercial ventures. Others have helped us improve, but have decided maybe not to go further. But it's a commitment that we make because we believe it's good for our company, good for our employees, and it's a good example to everybody else about working together to find something.
Great. Well, listen, we've come to the end of our time here. Please join me in thanking Mark Nelson, Vice Chairman of Chevron, for a great conversation. Thank you.